Hi, my name is Kayla, and I've made a series of videos that track my experience through a frozen embryo transfer cycle. I wanted to make these videos for anyone who is just starting the process and doesn't know what to expect, or anyone that's considering doing IVF and would kind of like a preview as to what this might look like for them. There's a lot that goes into this. I think some people might think that this is just you go into a clinic and they, put an egg or embryo into you and you just see if it works, but it's actually really involved. It's very time consuming, it's very expensive, and mentally and emotionally it's very overwhelming. So hopefully these videos are helpful for anyone who wants to see what someone's experience of this is actually like. Before I get started with my other videos, I wanted to just share a little bit about my experience so far. And also share some things to know before starting IVF, as well as some tips I would have liked to know before I had started. So first of all, I got started with IVF about 2.5 years ago. The first try was a successful one, so I'm really lucky, and I'm not sure if that happens a lot, but I did have a baby boy who is now 18 months old. That being said, you might see or hear him in future videos, so just be aware of that. I'm not sure how to edit it out, but just so you know beforehand, that's what that is. So we did have a baby boy who's now 18 months old. When I went back to IVF to have my second, my first experience back, that transfer was failed, so that did not work. The next transfer I had was successful, so I did get pregnant again, but then I miscarried at 7 weeks. So here I am now at my third attempt for my second baby, as I'm getting into now this transfer cycle, and that's what you'll be walking through with me. I do have separate videos that actually talk more specifically about that failed transfer and also about my miscarriage. Those are kind of helpful maybe to know beforehand, just so if you're ever in that situation, you might kind of have an idea as to what to expect with that. So I do have an additional video that talks about that specifically. I also have another video that talks about in more depth some of the initial stages that you have to go through before getting to the transfer cycle. There's going to be the assessment period, and then there's also going to be the egg retrieval. Those are two pretty big parts of this that I don't go into depth in here, but I do have a separate video that will talk about those things and what to expect with that. So please make sure you look at those. All right, so some things to know before getting started with IVF is, like I said, it is very time consuming. So I would expect to be going into the clinic at some points 2 to 3 times a week. In my experience, I've been to 2 different clinics. They tend to have appointments really early in the morning. So theoretically, you might be able to do that before your workday starts. It does make the day very long, but it's a good way to kind of go about it if you don't want to miss a lot of work. So that is one thing. Plan for a lot of appointments, a lot of visiting your clinic. That's going to happen very frequently. The next thing that is important to know is there is a lot of medication involved with this. Since you're struggling with infertility, which is why you're doing IVF in the first place, or, I guess if you don't have a partner and you're kind of going in with this solo, that might be another reason why you're doing this. But there are a lot of medications that are involved in this, so be prepared for that. For some reason, I did not know that before I started, and I was very, it was very eye-opening to kind of see how much I actually was going to have to do. Everything between oral pills to injections to vaginal inserts, you kind of get everything with this. So be prepared for a lot of medication. That being said, I do have another video that does an overview of all the medication you can expect when going through a frozen embryo transfer cycle. And I also have separate videos after that show you each of those medications more specifically, how to prepare them, how to inject them, and what they look like. So again, please feel free to check those out if you want more detailed information about that. All right, so now some tips that I would have liked to have myself before getting started on this very, very long journey. One of those tips are to fill all of your medication as soon as possible. It's really important to do that. It gives you a chance, one, to get familiar with all the different ones that you'll be taking. And it also makes sure that you have all your medicine in case you have to start one very quickly or without much notice. That could be a bad situation if you're asked to take a medication that night and you haven't filled it yet. So make sure you fill all of your medication as soon as possible. The last tip I have is just more about like your mental and emotional well-being. Again, this is a very overwhelming process, but there are periods of time where you're going to be waiting a lot. Whether you're waiting for procedure results, you're waiting for something to be scheduled, you're waiting for pregnancy results. You know, these things can become very like mentally consuming if this is all you're thinking about. I really encourage you to find something to keep you distracted while you're going through this process. You know, something like a hobby or a house project that you can work on, or a work project, or nurture your relationships, you know, spend more time with the people that you know. But I think that's really important to make sure that you are distracted instead of like stressing yourself out about what's going to happen next or pregnancy results or something like that. So those are the 2 tips I have. Fill your medication as soon as possible and find things positive, you know, to keep you distracted while you're going through all of the waiting periods. All right, so that's all I have for right now. Please take a look at all of my subsequent videos that are going to walk you through every step of the way as I go through this. And I have a few videos, like I said, that go into other areas more specifically, like my miscarriage and all of the initial steps to IVF. All right, I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them below so that I can answer them if I can. And I will see you next time in my follow-up videos.